TV1 රැස්වීදෙන ජීවිතේ.
A very good evening to all our viewers. This is Primetime News on News First, where the people come first. I'm Miyuki Portia, and our sign language interpreter for tonight is Brian De Cruz. Before we head into stories in detail, let's start off with a look at tonight's headlines.
News First headlines. Main sponsor.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
Acute shortage of medical supplies at government hospitals. Medical professionals take to the streets.
ඖෂධ නැතුව ලෙඩෙක් මැරෙනවා බලන්න වෙන තත්ත්වයක් ඉදිරියේදී ඇති වෙන්න පුළුවන්ද කියලා හිතා ගන්නවත් බැරි තත්ත්වයකට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා.
Sri Lanka plunges deeper into crisis. Diesel queues continue. Signs of the power crisis worsening. Will Bandula swear in as the next finance minister? Call for a debate on emergency laws. Parliamentarian Sumandiran's proposal to determine parliamentary majority rejected once more. Parliament failed to address the woes of the people. Parliamentarian Harin criticizes the ruling party and the opposition.
මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවත් ගොබ්බතනක් වෙලා හෙට අනිතර මිනිස්සු මේකට ගහනවාමයි එක පක්ෂක දේශපාලඥයෙක්ට උමනා නැහැ මේ රටේ මිනිස්සු දුක් විඳින දැනට උත්තරයක් ගේන්න.
Chairman of Avantgarde was at a security meeting on the day of the Mirihana protest. JVP reveals in Parliament. Public protests held island-wide even today.
News First headlines. Main sponsor.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
Sri Lanka's current economic crisis is one that grew gradually over several months. It is a crisis that News First constantly highlighted with warnings that were accompanied by statistics and expert analysis. Such reports falling on deaf ears has resulted in Sri Lanka plunging deeper into an abyss with each passing day and multiple insurmountable complications emerging. Today, Sri Lanka is without a Minister of Finance, Secretary to the Minister of Finance, and even a governor for its central bank, days before it initiates talks with the IMF to enter a bailout scheme. If the state of affairs are such, wouldn't it contribute to exacerbate this crisis? None of the difficulties which force the people onto the road do not seem to have been resolved yet.
A shortage of drugs, including life-saving medicine, has affected hospitals across the country at present. Healthcare workers say this has exposed the country's healthcare system to risk, with the issue expected to worsen by next week. The Government Medical Officers Association organized protests in many areas after declaring a health emergency. Doctors marched from their residential quarters opposite the Colombo National Hospital towards the Lipton roundabout and then marched towards the Health Ministry.
In the coming weeks and months, the people will face a worse crisis than what they are facing at present. They are hiding the truth from the people. The Government Medical Officers Association has decided to declare a health emergency in the country today.
Employees of the Professor Seneka Bibile Memorial Hospital marched towards the Bibile town and then returned back to hospital.
There is no health minister in Sri Lanka. There is no one to take up responsibility. There is a massive risk to our lives. We only have medicines that will last for about a month. The essential medicines that we have will only last for a couple of weeks.
Doctors from the Monaragala District Hospital, Matra General Hospital, Hambantota District Hospital and Karapite Teaching Hospital were among those who organized protests.
There is a shortage of medicines required for emergency treatment, medical treatment, diabetic patients and those with heart ailments. There is a shortage of surgical equipment as well. The Hambantota District Hospital will have to stop performing medical procedures by next week because of the shortage of medicines. The crisis will be worse than that of COVID-19 in the future.
Doctors from the Hambantota District and the Northwestern Province organized a media briefing today to comment on the current situation in the country.
Some hospitals don't have streptococcus, which is used to treat heart attacks. There is a shortage of tenecteplase as well. We use neostigmine to reverse anesthesia. There is a shortage of that drug. We need large quantities of gauze when performing surgeries. There is a shortage of gauze as well. We are running out of urinary catheters as well. Nowadays there is even a shortage of Panadol. This will be a worse crisis than the fuel or gas shortage, since this affects the people's health. There are some medicines that must be provided for patients with heart ailments within 2 or 3 hours of being admitted. We can't even imagine the consequences of not providing those medicines. We don't know whether doctors will have to watch their patients die without medicines in the future.
Sri Lanka imports many essential medicines from China, India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. The Health Ministry's Medical Supplies Division said the shortage of dollars has affected the importation of medicines. The State Ministry of Production, Supply and Regulation of Pharmaceuticals said there is a shortage of about 40 medicines at present. The State Ministry's Secretary Dr. Saman Ratnayaka said 60 types of medicines that are in the country would last for only a week or a month. He said arrangements are being made to import medicines under a credit line from India. The secretary noted that the Bank of Ceylon and People's Bank are to open letters of credit worth $7 million. Another loan of $20 million is to be obtained for this purpose. Chief Government Whip Johnson Fernando has said that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa would not resign from his position. We are not afraid. If they are trying to attack us, we are ready to face that. Don't mislead the youth. We wish to tell the people to rise up against 50,000 or 75,000 people who are taking to the streets and destroying the rest of the 22 million population. Myself and the opposition leader said that the president may resign. The parliament may appoint another president for the remaining term. 6.9 million people have voted for the president. On behalf of the government, I wish to say that the president won't resign. We will face this.
Mahinda Rajapaksa, Sirisena, Premadasa and J.R. Jayawardena all served as presidents. But there was no reason to launch a massive campaign against them under their rule. Emergency laws were declared to protect a family. Look at how many of their henchmen have fled the country. Look at how many of their family members have fled. We must speak about this. We must prevent them from fleeing. Yesterday, Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca said, "We won't allow anyone to escape." Many are afraid that he would take action in the government of Sajid Premadasa. That is why Nisanka Senadipati is provoking certain groups of people against this. They can't flee the country after looting the country's resources. There is a problem here. Although Johnston Fernando insisted that Gotabaya won't resign, the situation is such that he has to resign. The country won't move forward as long as Gotabaya is president.
Parliamentary sessions were adjourned for the second time after Samagi Jana Balavege parliamentarians held a protest in the well of the chamber as sessions resumed. 20 million people are watching what is happening in Parliament. Today's parliamentary sessions are going to waste, although this time has been allocated to debate and find solutions to the crisis.
මේ ආර්ථික අර්බුදය පිළිබඳ මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුව වග කියන්න ඕනේ. දිගින් දිගටම අපේ රටේ පවතින රාජ්‍ය මූල්‍ය පිළිබඳ අර්බුදයක්, ගෙවුම් ශේෂය පිළිබඳ අර්බුදයක් පිළිබඳව දශක ගණනාවක් තිස්සේ පටන් දශක ගණනාවක් තිස්සේ පටන් තමුන්නාන්සලා ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ ජනාධිපතිතුමා ගෙදර ගියයි.
Will Sri Lanka receive fuel simply because President Gotabaya Rajapaksa goes home? Will patients receive medicine as a result of organizing protests against him? Will children receive milk powder? This is a national crisis. The former government failed to find a solution to this crisis.
ආර්ථික අර්බුදයට විසඳුම් සොයා ගැනීම සඳහා තමුන්නාන්සලාගේ පසුගිය රජය අසමත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. ලංකාවේ ණය පීඩන අවදානම් පහළ මට්ටමට ගෙනීම, රාජ්‍ය මූල්‍ය සභාවේ වැඩ කටයුතු මිනිත්තු 5කට නතර කරනු ලැබේ. ව්‍යවසායකයන්ගේ මේයුම්.
Questions continue to be raised on whether the government still holds a majority in Parliament. Lawmakers missed an opportunity to put the majority to a test after opposition parties didn't back MP M.A. Sumandiran's call for a vote on the emergency laws yesterday. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa withdrew the gazette declaring a state of emergency yesterday. Opposition parliamentarian M.A. Sumandiran today stressed that the emergency laws that were in effect should be passed in Parliament, although they have been revoked. However, opposition and government parties didn't support the proposal today as well.
I raised the issue of the emergency proclamation being approved by Parliament yesterday. The Honourable Leader of the House stated that it will be put to vote today. Now, revocation of the emergency proclamation has no bearing on this. Whenever emergency is proclaimed, that must be approved by Parliament. Subsequent revocation has no bearing on that. Government may be running scared to have a vote taken in Parliament, but they can't escape from the constitutional duty of having the emergency proclamation placed in Parliament and a vote taken on it. I'm insisting that we put to vote the proclamation of emergency as made by the President on the 1st of April 2022.
I'd like to reply to the doubts created by Honourable Sumandiran. At the party leaders meeting yesterday, Honourable Sumandiran did raise this issue. And on behalf of the government, I very clearly stated that the emergency regulation will be tabled in the House today. Yes. Vote can be taken any other day. We know the constitutional provisions and we know when it will lapse. But the question was whether the emergency regulation will be placed before the House. It has been read by you, Honourable Speaker. The second regulation was last night. The Security Council, chaired by His Excellency the President, met and revoked so that it does not exist any longer from midnight last night. We know the constitutional provision. I agree with you that the emergency has been on for 2-3 days. So on that basis, we have placed the emergency regulation. The other new regulation also will be placed before you, Honourable Speaker, and you will read. We can't run government in the way you want. We can't run government in the way we will run according to the Constitution. I agreed and I assured that we will conduct the business of the House according to the Constitution. Not on the whims and fancies of we all.
Today's parliamentary debate focused on the status quo of the country instead of emergency law.
I called and asked the army commander as to why those bikes didn't have number plates. He said number plates will be added immediately. These motorcycles circled the streets during COVID-19, but nothing happened. People have not been abducted and killed during curfew. No one has been shot. These are innocent people. These are innocent young men. They have been brainwashed, and that is how such men died in the past.
Many of the weapons in the avant-garde case have rubbed against each other and their ID numbers were erased. Those in army uniforms on those bikes could be carrying those weapons. We have reports to confirm that the government's mercenaries are roaming the streets.
Similar bikes were used to assassinate Lasantha Wickrematunge. Another group similar to this was seen at the Mirihana protest too. This is a serious security concern because they can shoot an innocent person. The person did not even remove his mask. The police officer named Wetta Singh has stopped him, took his key and tried to remove his mask. He refused to do it. The police has decided to conduct an inquiry on this police officer. How can the army commander order the IGP to conduct an inquiry? There is another story. A Facebook account named Chagi Gallage has been posting status updates saying the police will be attacked by the army. A serious situation is brewing.
I would not advise any army soldier to enter such a situation with a weapon. I do not know if they were ordered or not. Police officers are empowered to uphold the law, but I condone the fact that he had attacked a person in uniform while civilians watched. Even if an army soldier attacked a police officer, I would stand by the victim.
An emergency security meeting with the attendance of the Defence Secretary and other officials was held while the Mirihana incident was ongoing. I will responsibly state that the chairman of Avantgarde, Nisanka Senadipati, attended that meeting and conducted its proceedings. That same person said, "Fear not, I deployed 200 to Mirihana."
නිස්සංක සේනාධිපති ඉතා පැහැදිලිව කිව්වා බය වෙන්න දෙයක් නැහැ මං මිරිහානට 200ක් බැස්සුවා කිව්වා මේ උද්ඝෝෂණ කරුව ළඟට ගිහිල්ලා අනුර දිසානාගේ වාහනේට හෙල්මට් එක පල්ලෙත් ඇතුළට යනවා ඒක විශාල ප්‍රශ්නයක් අපිට ආණ්ඩුවම දැනුවත්ව මැදිහත් වෙලා මේ උද්ඝෝෂණ කඩාකප්පල්කාරී කරලා ප්‍රචණ්ඩකාරී විදියට හැසිරෙන ආණ්ඩුවේ කුමන්ත්‍රණයක් තියෙනවා මේ රටේ ජනතාව ඒක දැනගත යුතුයි මේ පක්ෂ කවදාක්වත් ඔය උද්ඝෝෂණ ආපුවට ගහන්න කියලා නැහැ ඔබතුමාලා ලේ විලක් කරන්න හදන්න එපා මේ රට මේ පට්ට හොරු ටික මේගොල්ලෝ ඔබතුමාගේ රත්තරන් ටික හොරා කාවෝ මාළ හොරා කාවෝ මිනිස්සුන්ගේ ඔලු ගැඩි වල වැඩි තියවෝ නායකයෝ ජොනි අමතුමා මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ ජනාධිපතිවරව මරන්න මරාගෙන මැරෙන බෝම්බකාරියෙක්ව කොළඹට ගෙන්න අනුබල දීලා නායකත්වයේ දීපු පුද්ගලයා දැන් කියනවා මම ප්‍රචණ්ඩත්වේ නැහැ කියලා ළඟපුටුවේ ඉඳි ඉතිවේ එතුමා වෙනස් මත හදන්න එපා මෙයාගේ නායකයව කියනවා මේකට
His leader himself encouraged the people to fight. I am not lying. If his bodyguard was in fact the man in the helmet, I wonder if he travels in the cab with his helmet on. Honorable Speaker, conduct an inquiry into this.
A group of people blocked my path and asked me to stop. I did. They questioned me about the people who swindled millions from the people and escaped the country. I told them I revealed all of it 10 years. Jale Wickremasurya has pleaded guilty at a court in the US that he defrauded the Sri Lankan government. He is Mahinda Rajapaksa's aunt's son. I revealed in this chamber how a project of the Sri Lankan Navy was taken over by Nisanka Senadipati. He convened a meeting on the day of the Mirihana protest. The IGP was present along with the Secretary of Defence. He said that he had deployed 200 of his henchmen there and asking them not to worry. He ran away. Who was the man in the helmet that entered my vehicle? Lasantha Wickrematunge was killed in broad daylight. A killer has not been identified yet. Poddala Jayantha was abducted. Tajuddin was killed. The Secretary of Defence at the time is at the helm now. He's a vengeful man. That is why we have ensured our own security. Do you think we do not consider our safety when a murderer is the president? Many of our supporters provide us security each time I travel. This is our strategy. Do you think we will sacrifice ourselves? That is how Avantgarde's henchmen who attacked us with eggs were identified. I always notify our supporters when I travel. They were there. What is wrong with that? I continue to do that. We will not allow our lives to be taken away cheaply. They have no choice but to shout at me. They are the thieves. You are the ones who have amassed millions of public funds. I am the one who opposed it. If you think this is 1983, think again. That chapter has ended. The era of Mugabe and Gaddafi is no more. Hitler, who commanded millions in his army, is also dead. If they attempt to repeat their theatrics, that will result in failure. This would not have happened if the president stepped down from their mansion and worked with the people on the ground. He is now in a bunker. He did not heed your warnings either. Did he allow you to meet him? Did he pay attention to the concerns of ministers? He did not. He is on a high horse. If he wasn't an MP, Kehelia Rambukwalla would have also been on the road protesting. Am I wrong? That is why he is asked to go home. If the country's economy is in shambles, there is no food and electricity, won't people be forced to go onto the roads?
Go home කියන්නේ මේ රටේ ආර්ථිකය වැටුණා විනාශයට පත් කරාම ජනතාවට කණ්ඩ නැත්තම් ලයිට් ටික නැත්තම් ජනතාව පාරට වහින්නේ නැද්ද ජනතාව පාර අපිත් ලෑස්ති අපිත් ලාභයට මැරෙන්න සූදානම්.
We are not ready to die in an untimely manner. We will be born once and die once. We will face this. We won't flee. If you resort to violence, we won't back down either.
අපි කවදාකවත් අපේ අඩිය පස්සට ගන්නේ නැහැ. විපක්ෂේ පක්ෂ සංවිධාත්මක උද්ඝෝෂණ කරා නම් මේ වෙනකොට ගෝඨාභය.
If the opposition had organized protests, none of the members of the ruling faction won't be able to go home. It is the people who are protesting. Is the mother carrying a child an extremist? Remember, they want to either let this drag on until such time people stop protesting or let this protest to get violent. A bus was set on fire. There is CCTV footage. NIB and CID officers were there. Why have they failed to arrest the man who set fire to the bus? The police were watching when it happened. The people should also question themselves. If they don't want the president and the 225 MPs, do they want the military? What happened yesterday is what a military rule would look like. Gotabaya Rajapaksa has to resign immediately if the country is to have a future.
ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මහත්තයා වහාම ඉල්ලා අස්වෙන්න ඕනේ. මොකද සාමකාමී අරගලය. දැන් අපි දැක්කා සාමකාමී අරගල.
What is their peaceful struggle? We saw how peaceful protests were conducted. Now university students or other students are riled up and asked to protest. While they are protesting, other entities enter the protests. Those entities turn the protests violent. Find a leader in parliament and show more than 113 MPs. Then make him prime minister. Form a cabinet afterwards and carry on. If you can do it, go ahead. It can't be done.
අයි කිය කිය ඉන්නේ නැත්තේ කරන්න පුළුවන් කමක් නැහැ අවුරුදු දෙකක් ඇතුළත මේ රටේ ජනාධිපති.
There is no example in history where a president was rejected this much within 2 years. Is this not a curse? A person who creates a crisis to secure power will be destroyed through another crisis. We cannot band together. People are dying on the streets, but our parties still cannot work together. I am talking about my party as well. I am ashamed. SJB, Anrukumara Disanayaka, partly Ranavaka. What are we doing? Namal Rajapaksa questioned what would happen if Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigns. There are options in the constitution. A caretaker president can be appointed. The people do not want elections anymore. How can you conduct an election when there is no electricity, no fuel, and the people are in queues? Our first priority should be unity. It should be a genuine one. If Gotabaya Rajapaksa has a semblance of self-respect, he should resign. The President and Prime Minister are in limbo. The cabinet is in a mess. The state of the parliament is abysmal. I will not lie. I have to say this regrettably. I wish I was not a parliamentarian. However, I must note, there is an opinion where all 225 must go home. The general public appoints the 225. We need to reach a common consensus to develop the country. This is my personal opinion. If there is no one, give it to Harsha De Silva. Appoint him the president for 6 months. We need someone to run the country. If we cannot, how can we survive? Doesn't our brand of politics seem selfish if Anrukumara, our leader, or Namal thinks that is the right way? There is one thing we can do to gain the respect of the people once more. I will do it today. I even argued with the General Secretary. I will direct a letter to you tomorrow. I do not want my salary for 1 year. I will not eat from the canteen. Let's make a change. Don't the younger MPs' wives cook for them? Do you not have a vehicle to travel? If we do not want to be attacked and jeered, there is something we can do. There is no point drawing a salary of 250,000 rupees if the people are suffering. There was a party leaders meeting just yesterday, but there was no outcome. There is no decision. People will attack the parliament very soon. This parliament cannot make a stellar decision. Parliament was functioning till late last night. How much did that cost? There was no result. Not one politician from any party has the urge to address the woes of the people.
ප්‍රතිඵලයක් නැහැ. එකෙක්ට උමනා නැහැ. එක පක්ෂක දේශපාලඥයෙක්ට උමනා නැහැ. මේ රටේ මිනිස්සු දුක් විඳින තැනට උත්තරයක් ගියේ.
Speaking in Parliament, opposition leader Sajid Premadasa said steps must be taken to recover the wealth stolen from the people.
අද
There is no finance minister in the country. The finance minister, who was appointed a couple of days ago, tabled some report in parliament and resigned. The treasury secretary also resigned. The absence of officials in these positions is causing the country's collapse. How are they going to manage the country's finances? A quick solution to the dollar crisis can be found by recovering the fraudulent wealth that was exposed in the Pandora Papers. We have to bring that wealth that is overseas. Let us pass laws to that effect in parliament. Let's formulate laws to abolish the executive presidency. Views were expressed in parliament on an impeachment motion as well. There is a case relating to a land in Malwana. How is the Attorney General taking action? He doesn't submit the evidence on that. The court has to then release the suspect. The Attorney General's department has become politicized. As lawyers, we wish to state that if the Attorney General continues to act like this, we will table a proposal in parliament to impeach the Attorney General.
People flocked to the roads leading to the parliamentary complex today as well. They attempted to meet parliamentarians who are responsible for the current crisis in the country.
Crowds gathered outside Parliament for the second day today as part of a wave of protests in the country. Security was tightened at the main entry road to Parliament at the Polduwa junction in Battaramulla today. Only a few vehicles heading towards Parliament were allowed to pass the area. Vehicles were only allowed to pass through the entry road from Madiwala today. A heavy presence of security personnel was seen at the location. Private tuition teachers also held a demonstration today. The entry point to Parliament from the Japan Friendship Road was also closed off, while heavy security could be seen at the location. Only vehicles travelling towards the Parliament were allowed to pass through this route.
A protest was organized at the Kunagala town this afternoon. The protesters criticized the government for failing to resolve the problem. Protesters marched to the Prime Minister's coordinating office at the Yantha-Palava junction. However, security was tightened in the area.
පුරවැසියන්ට මේ වගේ බාධක දානවා නම් පුරවැසියෝ ඉල්ලන්නේ මේ වෙලාවේ ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ අයිතිය අපේ රට අපි ඉල්ලන්නේ. ඇත්තටම ගහන්න පුළුවන් අපි මෙතන කලබලයක් කරොත් හිතට එකඟව වලට ගහන්න පුළුවන්. කනේ උනේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ මොකද්ද කිව්වේ? එයාලා අයියලා තමයි. අපි ජනතාව මොකටද? 69 ලක්ෂය තමයි අපි. මෙතනින් යන්න බෑ. මෙතනින් ගියොත් අවම වලය පාවිච්චි කරන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා.
ගහන ගේම් අපි දන්නවා. මෙතෙන්ට ඇවිල්ලා අපි අරගල කරා වගේ අරගල කරන්න හදපුවත් අපි දන්නවා. ජීවත් වෙන අවුරුදු 50 අපි 400 ජීවත් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ 50 සතුටින් ඉන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ මුන්. රටේ ඉන්න මිනිස්සුන් ඔක්කොම විකුණා කයිමුන්. ඇඳලා ඉන්න කතාවට ඕන එකයිද කියන්නකෝ. ඇඳලා ඉල්ලන්නේ. අපිත් එක්ක මේ වෙලාවේ එකතු වෙන්න සර්. ඔයාලා විතරයි අපිත් එක්ක එකතු වෙන්න ඕනේ. ආලා කන්නේ 225 පන්නන්න පුළුවන් සර්. අපේ තාත්තලාත් ඔයාලද සර්? මගේ තාත්තෙක් මේ අනන්නේ නියම තාත්තෙක් වෙන්න නියම රාජ්‍ය සේවකයෝ. බොරුවට රකින්න එපා කුම්ම. අපිට අන්න දෙන්න සර්. අපේ තාත්තලා කෝටිපතියෝ නෙමෙයි. කුලී වැඩ කරලා අපිට කන්න දෙන්නේ. ඒ මිනිස්සු රැට අඬනවා සර්. පවුවද ආල් ටික කියන්නේ කොහොමද කියලා. 50 පඩියෙන් අපි 4 දෙනෙක් හදන්නේ සර්. රුපියල් 500ක් වුණාම පරිප්පු කිලෝ එක රුපියල් 500ක් වුණාම කොහොමද සර් අපිට කන්න දෙන්නේ? කොහොමද කන්න දෙන්නේ? අපි කැම්පස් යන්නේ.
The Kurunegala road was blocked for a few hours due to this protest.
People who have been affected by the ongoing crisis are saying they are rallying for a common cause regardless of any differences. There are no differences among the people now. There is no racism. All of us are demanding them to return the stolen wealth. We have no affiliation to any party, neither do we have differences. These problems have affected all of us. The entire country is demanding that Gotabaya should go home. We don't see a representative speaking on behalf of us in parliament. They are discussing personal matters and are only concerned about their security. Don't use the parliament to resolve your personal disputes. Speak about the issues faced by the people. The 225 MPs meet in parliament and speak from day to night, but they don't discuss the issues faced by the country. They discuss how they can switch sides and obtain positions. They speak about attacks on their homes, but the people are suffering on the streets. There are queues for fuel. People have been affected due to power cuts. Whether they form an interim government or not, if they don't solve our problems, this country will collapse even further. The entire country has taken to the streets. Teachers and lawyers are protesting. People are in queues for fuel. There are protests everywhere. But they are wasting time in parliament by raising old issues and speaking about their personal problems. We don't see them resolving the people's problems such as the power cuts, fuel crisis, gas shortage and the shortage of essentials. If they are assuming that the people are ignorant, then this struggle will only increase in the future.
We gathered yesterday regardless of any religious differences. There is no division as Sinhalese, Muslims or Tamils. We are Sri Lankans. Now no one can stage theatrics. There's a group that engages in these theatrics. Don't stir up claims of Kottu that makes people infertile. Raja from Jaffna, Mohammed from Colombo and Siripala from the south are now united. I wish to tell my fellow people that they might attack mosques or Buddhist statues. Don't do foolish things like that again. We won't give you another chance. They are thinking of setting an interim government. Don't try to shuffle the same pack of cards again.
Let's now toss over to a short commercial break. Do stay with News First. We will be right back.
Tech Bus, launched to increase the tech know-how of Sri Lankan students, concludes on a successful note. Organized by Slit Institute.
Tech Bus.
Main sponsor.
Slit Knowledge University, challenging convention and redefining education.
Welcome back to the news. Multiple protests were held in Colombo and its suburbs even today. Many people had gathered even today to protest at the Independence Square in Colombo, and the protest is still ongoing.
A protest was staged at the Kolpiti Junction this evening.
Most of these protesters are young people. They came here at around 7:30 engaging in this protest. They are not affiliated to any political party. They are simply saying that the people have had enough. They cannot bear the brunt of this economic crisis anymore. Why have you decided to come out to the streets?
Because it's important for the people of Sri Lanka to know that, you know, what these leaders are doing are not right. We need action, tangible change, like abolishing the PTA, like abolishing the 20th Amendment, abolishing executive presidency. We need for leaders to be educated.
I would always say that we need a new youth. Youth should lead this country.
One such protest had been organized under the Dehiwala flyover.
The youth that is staging this protest right here at Independence Square, demanding a change. This is the mandate of the youth.
We do not stand for tyranny, we do not stand for dictatorship, and more than anything, we do not stand for delusional leaders.
We want a system that is not going to be biased just to the elite. It's going to be an all-inclusive one, regardless of gender, caste, race, or whatever it is. So we will keep making our stand in hopes of some change to come.
Several protesters gathered opposite the Nelumpokana even today to voice their displeasure over the mounting cost of living and the conduct of the current administration.
Vallavatha Methodist Church organized a silent protest last evening.
The Vallavatha Methodist Church had organized a silent protest last evening. Bishop Reverend Asiri Pereira, the former head of the Methodist Church, also took part in the protest. The reason people of Sri Lanka are undergoing a huge pressure is because the relevant parties were concerned of their own well-being over that of the people. From everything that's happening, it is clear that the general public should be more vigilant when appointing the rulers of this country. It is time that we completely change the system of governance.
Let's now toss over to a short commercial break. Stay tuned.
Tech Bus, launched to increase the tech know-how of Sri Lankan students, concludes on a successful note. Organized by Slit Institute.
Tech Bus.
Main sponsor.
Slit Knowledge University, challenging convention and redefining education.
Welcome back to the news. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has appointed a distinguished group of financial and economic experts as members of the Presidential Advisory Council on Multilateral Affairs and Debt Sustainability.
According to a media release from the President's Media Division, the experts are former Governor of the Central Bank and former Director of Economic Affairs of the Commonwealth Secretariat, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, Professor of Development Practice at the Georgetown University and former Chief Economist at the World Bank, Professor Shanta Devarajan, former Director of the Institute of Capacity Development at the IMF and former Deputy Director of the IMF's African Department, Dr. Shamini Kure. According to the PMD release, the members of the advisory team who met the President discussed key issues, including continuing key communication required to initiate the International Monetary Funds Program. The Presidential Advisory Council is tasked with consulting with Sri Lankan institutions and officials affiliated with the IMF, providing guidance on how to address the current debt crisis and Sri Lanka's sustainable recovery.
The Financial Times has reported that the Sri Lankan rupee has become the worst performing currency in the world. Quoting economists, the FT reported that so much depends on whether Sri Lanka can get any IMF funding and that a stable government matters. Alex Holmes, Asia economist at Capital Economics, told FT that, quote-unquote, with the government in disarray, the prospects of securing an IMF package looks bleak. He said that again elevates the chances that the government will eventually have to resort to a sovereign default.
Tea traders in the country say the current situation on the shortage of fuel and electricity is a major threat, resulting in the disruption of daily activities in the plantation sector. The tea industry supports the livelihood of over 2 million people, exports over 90% of its annual production, and the export earnings are over $1.3 billion. In a statement, the association said the transport of green leaf from the fields of the tea smallholders and plantations to the factories are virtually bordering a collapse. It added that the manufacturers are unable to process the harvest on time due to the lack of diesel for the generators. According to the tea traders, the likelihood of some factories closing down due to the current situation is real. The statement said the buyers and the exporters are affected by the lack of fuel and electricity, unable to process and meet delivery schedules of the importers. The tea traders are of the stance that this would have an irreversible impact on the industry when the importers look to replace Ceylon tea with teas from other origins.
The Asian Development Bank said it projected Sri Lanka's economic growth to dip to 2.4% in 2022. The Asian Development Outlook for 2022 shows weaker growth is expected in Sri Lanka as consumption and investment remain muted due to monetary policy tightening, supply shortages and inflammatory pressures. According to the ADB, inflation in other developing countries in Asia was lower than in other regions in 2021. However, Sri Lanka has been named as an exception together with Azerbaijan and Pakistan. ADB says for Sri Lanka, rising food, fuel and commodity prices, higher import prices, supply chain disruptions, shortages stemming from the foreign exchange squeeze, demand side pressures and exchange rate depreciation will drive inflation higher in 2022. ADB says a chemical fertilizer ban imposed in May to promote organic cultivation also put upwards pressure on inflation. Sri Lanka has also fallen to the list of exceptions in terms of remittances. Although remittances stayed strong in 2021 for 22 Asian economies, Sri Lanka has shown a downward trend. According to ADB, the apparent sharp decline in Sri Lanka was associated with parallel exchange rates, making it worthwhile for overseas workers to remit money through unofficial channels. ADB also says increases in energy import bills will have the greatest impact on energy importing economies that are managing balance of payment strains, including Sri Lanka, whose currency depreciated by 30% from the 9th to the 25th of March.
Meanwhile, the Human Rights Watch says any international monetary fund program in Sri Lanka should protect the rights of low-income people and address corruption and obstacles to the rule of law. In a letter to the IMF, Human Rights Watch has presented several recommendations to the IMF. They include: assess the expected direct and indirect impacts of any adjustments on low-income people in Sri Lanka in line with the social spending strategy adopted by the IMF in 2019 and ensure that these are adequately mitigated. Implement progressive tax measures that do not further burden people living in poverty. Include reforms to restore the independence of institutions including the Judiciary, Auditor General, Attorney General and the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery or or corruption, which are key for economic growth and fighting corruption. Require the Sri Lankan government to restore independent investigations into corruption allegations and prosecute those found responsible. The letter read, quote-unquote, Sri Lanka needs economic help, but to be effective, the IMF program needs to be robustly negotiated and properly carried out. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has said it is closely monitoring the ongoing developments in Sri Lanka. The UN office has urged Sri Lankan authorities to diffuse tensions peacefully. The spokesperson of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Liz Throssell, criticized Sri Lankan authorities for what she described as excessive and unwarranted police action against peaceful protesters, as well as measures such as a declaration of state emergency, imposition of a 36-hour curfew and restricting access to social media. Such measures, she said, are aimed at preventing and discouraging people from legitimately demonstrating their grievances through peaceful protests. Throssell further remarked that the drift towards militarization and weakening of institutional checks and balances have affected the Sri Lankan state's ability to effectively tackle the economic crisis. She added that the High Commissioner has also previously voiced concern that the government responds to criticism and dissent in ways that undermine civil space. We leave you tonight with the Negatimu Sri Lanka song. For the News First team, I've been Miyuki Portia, along with our sign language interpreter Brian De Cruz. Take care and good night.
අඳුරු වලාපට අතරින් හිනැහි නැගිටිමු ශ්‍රී ලංකා
දියසක සංකා බාධක අතරින් නැගිටිමු ශ්‍රී ලංකා
හිතමු ඉදිරියම කාවන්න හැම නැගිටිමු ශ්‍රී ලංකා හෙට ඉදිවන නව ලෝකය හමුවේ නැගිටිමු ශ්‍රී ලංකා Negitimu Sri Lanka.
Negitimu Sri Lanka. Kisidanu venas minisat guna piripun rata Sri Lanka.
Mevan bhumiye urumaya apage rakagamu Sri Lanka. Idiriya gana ekwi අපසිතුවොත් රැකගන්නට ලංකා
දුරුවී ව්‍යසන අප ඉදිරියේ ඇති බාධක ජයගන්වා
නැගිටිමු ශ්‍රී ලංකා
අපි නැගිටිමු ශ්‍රී ලංකා மாற்றம் காணாத மனித பண்புகள் ஏந்திடும் ஸ்ரீலங்கா
நாட்டு மூட்டினம் உரிமை தேசத்தை காப்போம் இரு கண்ணா
Time for us to hope and pray and heal our motherland.
We must unite and march ahead. Arise Sri Lankans now.
Yelendada Sri Lanka. Rise up Sri Lanka.
Anduru walapata atarin hinehi negitimu Sri Lanka. Diyasaka sanka badaka atarin negitimu Sri Lanka.
Hitamu idiriyama ekawanna hema negitimu Sri Lanka.
Hita idiwana navaloka hamuwe negitimu Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, rise up Sri Lanka. Negitimu Sri Lanka, api negitimu Sri Lanka.
Gammadda, Negitimu Sri Lanka.